It was named after one of the most iconic German cars in motorsport history, but it wasn't a race car. It wasn't a track car. It was barely even a supercar in the traditional sense. No, this was arguably the first ever example of a proper Super GT car. The Mercedes-McLaren SLR. At the 1999 Detroit Auto Show, Mercedes showed up with a risky concept, shall we say. It was a coupe, but it was also offered as a roadster. Both of them had 5-liter AMG source V8s, and both of them had crazy mad styling. But in order to understand why it was risky, we have to travel back to the 1950s and Mercedes' racing program. The 300 Gullwing and the 300 Roadster were immensely successful. The W196, which it was based off of, had done very well at Le Mans in 1954, and in 1955 they decided to cut the roof off, turn it into a speedster, and enter it in the Mille Miglia, calling it the 300 SLR, or Sport Light Racing. Now, they had an all-star team of 2 cars, driven by Juan Manuel Fangio and Sterling Moss. Pretty good F1 drivers, I think we can all agree on. But critically, Moss had a co-driver by the name of Dennis Jenkinson, who used this little revolutionary technology called pace notes to set an average speed of 98 miles an hour over the 1,000-mile journey, beating Fangio by half an hour. It changed the rallying world forever, and it cemented the 722 300 SLR as one of the greatest race cars, not just in Mercedes history, but motorsport history. So calling your concept car the SLR, that puts a pretty big target on your head. But it also generates a lot of buzz, so Mercedes greenlit production. Now, in order to make this concept into a proper car, Mercedes contacted their Formula 1 partners, McLaren, and their chief designer, Gordon Murray. Now, this was McLaren's first road project since the F1, and they went to work. They didn't actually touch the styling. The styling was pretty good aerodynamically, and it really generated a lot of public buzz. So they built the underside of the car. And by built, I mean rebuilt. The entire underside. Not only did they add a smooth floor and a massive diffuser at the end, they added side pipes, since that's the only place the exhaust could go because of the smooth floor. They moved the engine 3 feet behind the front bumper for better weight distribution. They made the chassis out of aluminum, which was then bonded to a carbon fiber tub. In fact, carbon fiber was everywhere, whether it be the pioneering carbon ceramic brakes, the carbon fiber bodywork, or even the carbon fiber crumple zones, also a first in a production car. Now granted, it wasn't exactly a Caterham at 3,900 pounds, but that weight saving allowed them to emphasize on comfort and luxury. So, you take a lot of weight out with the carbon fiber, then you add a lot of it with luxury amenities, such as hand-stitched leather covering the entire interior, and a 5-speed, smooth automatic gearbox. It was a comfortable car, and that was sort of the main flaw. The public wasn't really ready for it yet. It was the same price as an Enzo, and it had a 5.4-liter supercharged V8 making 620 horsepower. So it had Enzo specs in many ways, but it was not an Enzo, because it was very comfortable, and the suspension was soft, and the 5-speed auto was a bit slow. So, it's very strange. Nowadays, with the 599 GTB and the Ferrari Roma and whatnot, there's a whole bunch of super GT cars. But back in the early 2000s, it was much rarer, and people didn't know what they were buying. it couldn't really decide what it wanted because of its vastly different parent companies. Mercedes wanted a comfy, continent-crushing GT car, while Gordon Murray and McLaren wanted their usual lightweight obsessions to be upheld. So, it didn't really work. Sure, it did 0 to 60 in 3.6 seconds, but again, it was $500,000 in 2000s money. People expected a lot more, and they expected it to handle a lot better. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't what it was for the price. Now, Mercedes was expecting to sell about 500 per year for 7 years, and that would have been perfect for them. They met that objective on the first year it launched, and then no year after that. They sold just 216 in 2007, which is a bit off of their target, so they sold just over 2,000 Roadsters and Coupes combined before production ended in 2010. Not the best run ever. It was, again, the market was not ready for what the SLR truly was. Nowadays it might sell in mass, but back then, God, early 2000s already back then, that's not a good sign. The market simply wasn't ready for it. Now, they did make a lot of special editions, and traditionally, for a high-end supercar or sports car, a special edition is nothing more than a fresh coat of paint. Not for the SLR, though, no. They made the 722 edition, which is the starting number for the 1955 Mils Maglia winner by Sterling Moss, which meant it was given a modified engine up to 641 horsepower and a 209-mile-an-hour top speed. In order to stop that, it had increased brake size and lowered ride height. But again, this is still a GT car, even though it handled a lot better. It still had new luxury leather upholstery and Alcantara trim. Fancy. But if you wanted to go a bit more proper Mille Miglia, you had to get the SLR Sterling Moss. Also named after that famous run in 55. Speedsters are all the rage these days with the Elva and Monza and all that stuff. The SLR did it a decade ago. It had 651 horsepower, and the Speedster layout cut 440 pounds out of the car. Now, if the SLR was expensive at $500,000, the Sterling Moss was simply ludicrous at over $1 million in early 2000s money. Only 75 of them were made, and in order to qualify for one, you had to be an SLR owner already. That's a very expensive two sets of cars. And that was all that Mercedes did. But McLaren did not give up. A year after it ended production, McLaren's in-house personalization shop, MSO, went to work on the SLR. The bodywork was a bit of a combination of the SLR Specials and the normal coupe, but it had new steering, new suspension, and new exhaust. And since this is an MSO, each one of the 25 cars made is unique, and no car looked the same. Now, these are all the road cars. We know that SLR stands for Sport Light Racing. So they better have made a racing version, right? Yesn't. Because they made the 722 GT. It was going to take part in its own one-make racing series, but the 21 cars required to meet FIA Support Series requirements, only 12 buyers could be found. Now, they still made the 21 cars, at a cost of $600,000 plus the original donor SLR, but they couldn't find enough buyers for them. Regardless, the car is mighty impressive for a car that never got to race. 900 pounds were chucked out of the SLR, despite the full FIA roll cage and fuel cell. The carbon ceramic brakes were replaced with steel brakes to comply with FIA regulations, while the road engine got some racing parts on it, pushing power to 670 horsepower, which makes it 12 miles an hour slower because of the very complicated aero kit. So, it's a lot more powerful and yet slower. It has top speed about 196. Pathetic, I know. Personally, I love this car. I actually got to see it in person next to the SLR Sterling Moss. I always kick myself for not getting a picture of the SLR and the Sterling Moss next to each other in the same photo, because I think that's just so cool. I love ensemble photos. I'm getting off topic. The SLR is a car that you look back on more fondly. It's a pioneer, which means it never got the love, at least in terms of the sales department, that future cars would get. The 599 sold out in all of its special editions. The Aston Martins are immensely popular, making really the benchmark Super GT cars, I would argue. The AMG GT might be more sports car, but still. The SLR, though, that laid the foundation for what those cars would do. It was an honest-to-God GT car with comfortable suspension, a great interior, an automatic gearbox so you could chill on the freeway, but at the same time, if you went to a track, it could hit 200 miles an hour and blitz it around the corners. Not as fast as an Enzo, let's be real, despite the price tag. But I'll tell you what, if I had to go on a road trip down the south of France, I would definitely take an SLR over an Enzo.